Welcome to the Twisted Tentacle Inn. I'm your innkeeper, Vase Odin, and today we'll be doing another Carolyn Fern deck tech. The League of Extraordinary Investigators is well underway. We're about halfway through it. I used a Schizo tool deck that I was experimenting with, and it's not going so well. So I figure for Season 2, we'll be doing the Path to Carcosa. I figure that Carolyn Fern would be a great fit because I played with her more than anyone else. And even though I've done tons of playthroughs with Carolyn, I think it'll still be fresh and new because her deck building requirements are so vast and open that you can make thousands of different decks with her with different types of themes and mechanics and advantages. So I think it'll be interesting to see this build and see how well it does in Carcosa. So I'm going to go over some of the goals that I have for the deck that I'm going to build for her, and we're going to go through each card and why I chose it. And for those who are not familiar with Carolyn Fern, she is a Guardian Investigator who was released during the Circle Undone cycle. Her deck building requirements allow her to take Guardian cards from 0 to 3, all neutral cards 0 to 5, any card that heals horror from level 0 to 5, and a combination of 15 Seeker and or Mystic cards from level 0 to 1. So she's got a very vast card pool. So when I build a deck, I always ask myself what I'm setting out to do. In this case, it's a solo deck, so we have to cover all the bases. In this case, the most important would be combat and enemies. So we've created a combat and enemies package with some weapons and some additional ways to deal free and extra damage. Next, Carolyn heals horror. That's like her thing. So we definitely want to take advantage of that and put some cards in to help do that. Next, the deck that is going to evolve from this is going to rely heavily on pump cards, where you can pump resources to boost some stats. So we need a ton of resource generation. And the final package is going to be avoiding some really difficult tests and finding ways around them. So this is a deck that is the preliminary deck. It'll probably evolve. It's already evolved plenty in the last couple of weeks. It'll probably evolve several more times, and I'll test play a few more times after it's changed before the league begins. We're still a few months away from Season 2, so we got plenty of time to do so. And before I go over all the cards, some of you may not be familiar with the League of Extraordinary Investigators. It's a league just for fun. It's not really a fully competitive thing, although there is a winner at the end. But mostly you're just playing for fun. Everyone builds an investigator deck. Season 2 will have the taboo list, if you're familiar with that, more than likely. And so we're building decks assuming that that's going to happen. And then we're going to run through the entire campaign of the Path to Carcosa, earning XP and victory points. And we'll continue that way until the end of Carcosa and see who has the most victory points. That's basically it. Everyone plays their deck by streaming it, so that you can't edit your videos or anything like that. It's a live stream, and then two peers get to review your playthrough, and they'll find mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes when they play this game, so you get docked some points and other things for your mistakes that you make. And that's basically the gist of the league. So with that said, let's go ahead and go over each card and why I chose it, and then we'll go from there. Alright, and starting with our enemy management package is the Meat Cleaver. I chose this weapon because it gives you a +1 to attack, putting Carolyn's attack at a 3, but you can take a horror to boost the damage by 1, so you'd be doing 2 damage on the attack. And any enemy you kill when attacking with the Meat Cleaver heals horror. So I plan on using this as like a final blow, not so much as a weakening. So I won't be using the 2 damage as often, unless it's the only weapon that I have out. But for the most part, it's going to be the killing blow, so I can heal horror and gain a resource by doing so. And next up, we have the 45 Thompson. It's a two-handed weapon, so it's going to take both my hand slots, but it has 5 ammo, which is really nice, and just gives me a +2 to attack when I fight with it, putting Carolyn's base combat at 4, and it does +1 damage. So a very heavy, reliable weapon. If I can get it out, I think it'll put Carolyn at a decent odd of hitting. Next up, I put the Enchanted Blade. I needed to put at least 2 more weapons in for a total of 5 cards that are going to be weapons. So I figured the best option in this case, because the machete was probably going to be on the taboo list, or is on the taboo list, so probably not going to be able to be used up front. So I decided on the enchanted blade. It's great because I can use a charge to get +2 to attack and +1 to damage, which is very nice and reliable. Something Carolyn desperately needs. I've also included one copy of anatomical diagrams. I didn't go with two because I am going to play a little bit with taking horror on purpose, and you can't use this if you have less than 5 remaining sanity. So I figured one was enough. This is going to be nice to take care of some tougher but non-elite enemies, and I think it'll be definitely better than having a skill card that'll boost my combat, because this boosts or reduces the combat value of an enemy by 2 for the entire round, which is pretty nice. This deck in its upgraded form is going to have a ton of testless damage cards, but initially there's going to be only a few. Dynamite Blast will be one of our most important cards for dealing with bosses, dealing 3 damage without taking a test and without being in the same location as the enemy. It costs 5, so we need a ton of resource generation for this, which we are going to have in this deck for sure. And of course, a Great Garden card, Vicious Blow, one of the few skill cards that we're going to have in this deck, and it's going to help us deal extra damage for free without having to make 2 attacks, and it'll give us a nice little boost to combat. This will get upgraded later to Vicious Blow level 2 as well. And we will be relying heavily on pumping our combat stat, willpower as well, but mostly combat. So physical training is going to be integral early in the game until we can purchase Kenai. So this will help us land some hits on the enemies that are much tougher to hit, and this deck will have plenty of resources left over and available to be able to do so. Now for the ally in the deck, I went ahead and picked Peter Silvestri. Initially I had chosen Alice Luxley, and although the +1 to intellect was really nice, it wasn't quite working as well in the first scenario for the free damage as well as I expected it to be. I think Peter with his horror healing is going to be far more useful in this opening scenario, and then later on we will be upgrading to Alice Luxley, but keeping Peter as well. So that's a plan later on in the campaign. So along with Peter, as part of our horror healing package, I went ahead and got 2 copies of Liquid Courage. I don't like the test, the willpower 2 test. It's a little too close to her willpower of 3, so it can cause me to discard cards, but at least it's pretty cheap to play, and the 4 charges are really nice. Possibly healing 2 horror each time is something that's extremely useful, and having 2 of these is more than enough horror healing for a solo play with Carolyn. I also went ahead and picked Forbidden Knowledge. This is not part of my horror healing package. This is part of the resource generation package. I only picked 1 copy because I think I'll be taking enough horror as it is, but 1 copy should suffice. Peter will be busy healing horror in this campaign already, but this will be nice to get a resource and then another one once Peter heals it. So I didn't want 2 copies, but 1 is definitely going to be helpful, at least early on. I think we'll upgrade out of it later. And then of course 2 copies of Emergency Cash, a very useful card that pretty much could be in a lot of decks. And then, of course, 2 copies of the best resource generator that Carolyn can get, and that would be Crack the Case. Crack the Case is fantastic because it's a fast action. Generally, just on average, you're going to get about 3 resources, so it already makes it better than Emergency Cash because of its fast action. But there are a lot of locations with 5 Shroud, and using my clue generation package should be nice and easy to be able to catch 5 resources out of each use of these. And as far as treacheries, I've got 2 cards that'll help with treacheries. Deny Existence, which will also help cancel some damage from enemies, but mostly I think I'll be using it against treacheries that I fail, as well as Ward of Protection. Of course, if you can take both of those, you do. So I took 2 copies of each one of them. Now for testless clue gathering, we're going to be using Drawn to the Flame. Initially, I think we're starting with 2 copies, but eventually we'll just get down to 1. The treacheries get really just brutal later in this campaign, so I don't want to be drawing extra treachery cards, but it is nice to be able to grab 2 clues for free. So keeping one copy just for that, but moving the other one to something else later on. Scene of the Crime, though, is a fantastic card, and I will be keeping 2 copies of this in the deck throughout the entire campaign. And better than Scene of the Crime in a lot of uses is Working a Hunch, mostly because it is a fast action and lets you discover a clue for free as well, just like Scene of the Crime. So both of them have their uses. I think Working a Hunch is a little bit better most of the time, although Scene of the Crime does have its moments where it's a little bit better than Working a Hunch. So both of them will give me some phenomenal free clues. And then for emergencies, I do have Take the Initiative and just 1 copy. I know what you guys might be thinking, and you can put in the comments your thoughts as to why this is a mistake, but I've decided on just doing 1 skill card other than Vicious Blow, and that is 1 copy of Take the Initiative. We'll see how it plays out during the playthrough that's going to happen later on today or this morning, and if it doesn't work, then I'll go ahead and add some more skill cards, but I think we're going to be okay. Most of my Carolyn decks tend to run pretty low on skill cards because she needs cards that give her more reliable boosts for a little bit longer. Things like anatomical diagrams and mind over matter, that kind of stuff. So I think it's going to work out pretty well. Anyways, for upgrades, I think my very first purchase is going to be Keen Eye. It's going to be invaluable in this deck, so definitely will be one of my first, if not my first, one of my first purchases. And of course, another early purchase, which may end up being the very first, depending on how much XP I get. Stick to the plan because it'll help with reliability and getting set up for the scenario ahead. So Stick to the Plan is another one that's definitely going in the upgraded deck, as well as Vicious Blow level 2. Vicious Blow level 1 is going to be a lifesaver, I'm sure, in this deck. Vicious Blow level 2 will be even better. Not to mention one of my favorite cards in Carolyn, and that is Cheat Death. This card, when I ran through Carcosa with Carolyn using a completely different deck, this card was the MVP. It helped her in so many scenarios. I can't even remember, but it was at least half of the scenarios. I'll also be upgrading to Ever Vigilant. I'll probably just need 1 copy. Maybe I'll replace one of my resource generation cards for another copy, since I'm going to have so many allies, but we'll see. Speaking of allies, we'll be using Beat Cop level 2. We're not going to use the level 1 version, mostly because we're not going to get Charisma until a little bit after, so we won't need so many allies in the deck. And we will be upgrading to Charisma once we do purchase those Beat Cop level 2s. I plan on having 2 copies of those. And once Charisma's out, we'll get a second copy of Charisma and then start getting a bunch of allies. We're going to get probably 1 Guard Dog, as well as Alice Luxley, for a bunch of free damage in different ways and shapes and forms to help Carolyn deal with enemies. Because she's still, even later on, I anticipate that she's going to have a hard time hitting those high combat enemies. And being able to deal free damage consistently is going to be key to her survival. And we will be upgrading the Liquid Courage to Kerosene. I haven't decided yet if I'm just going to upgrade 1 to 1 Kerosene or do both to 2 Kerosenes. I do like the 4 charges. The test is the one thing that bugs me, but Kerosene does require you to kill an enemy to be able to heal the horror, which can be problematic, whereas Liquid Courage doesn't have any requirements other than making that test. But regardless, you still heal 1 horror, which is really good. But I guess we'll see. Anyways, if I do have some extra experience points available, we'll upgrade Dynamite Blast to the level 2. Probably not going to happen because this will take me to really high levels of experience, but if I have it, I'll do it. And that's the deck as it's evolved into so far. Let me know if you have any suggestions or recommendations, or if you have questions as to why I chose certain things. We're going to be playing this deck through a couple of test runs later on today in the morning. So stay tuned on the channel and keep an eye out for the announcement when I go live. It should be 9 a.m. Pacific time, which is right around noontime Eastern Standard Time. And if you're on the stream, I'm going to try and interact with the chat and try and get some help and assistance and answer any questions that people might have on the deck. So hopefully you enjoyed this video and got a little insight into how I do my deck building. It's not necessarily the greatest way to deck build, but it's how I do it. If you have any questions, feel free to post them
down there
in the comments below, and I'd be happy to answer them. This is Innkeeper Vase Odin with the Twisted Tentacle Inn. Check in anytime. I'll talk to you then.